We took all the kids from the House of the Hearth out to see a film, and after it finished, they all started clamoring for me to try out acting for some reason. Even Lenny was chanting along with them, but being the center of attention is draining. So the moment they left me to go harass the director instead, I was out of there. Oh, sorry, Bonnie. I didn't mean to leave you out of the conversation. My bad. No, we just met. We bumped into each other right after I slipped away. Yep. If there's no commission to follow up on, could we post a notice about the missing cat instead?
I believe this cat belongs to me.
I already told you, this isn't your cat!
You're right. I'm a member of the Guards. The name's Elodie. I'm currently investigating a cross-border smuggling case. This cat here... Bonnie was her name? Well, her owner is one of the prime suspects of our investigation.
Lynette, you're, not at rehearsal?
You can drop the act, brother. In fact, I don't think either of us will have a need for acting anytime soon. You should know better than to try and keep something from me. You've never been able to do that, even when we were kids.
And that's why I tried to distract you with the masked mime show. But I guess you're just too good.
Care to introduce us to your new assistant?
This is Officer Shovras, captain of the Special Security and Surveillance Patrol. You may have met her already.
Nice to see you. I should clarify something. Mr. Lenny's here at my invitation, not the other way around. To borrow your expression, Miss Lynette, I suppose that would make him my assistant more than anything. We've brought on Mr. Lenny as a consultant in the past. He was instrumental in helping us crack a case involving a perpetrator who used magic tricks to commit crimes. I was hoping he'd be able to provide some valuable insight this time around as well.
So you've heard everything then?
That's exactly why we're here. There's always been questions surrounding the fall of the Lefebvre family. Some people even believe the House of the Hearth was involved. Whoever was behind it all was extremely cautious. They didn't leave a shred of evidence. This very fact, however, leads me to believe it was indeed the work of that harbinger. I took a look at the entrance and exit records of all the carriages that night. Let's just say it wasn't hard to deduce that there's ill will between you two. Don't worry, I don't have any evidence to that effect, and I certainly don't plan on going to bat for such a despicable family. Plus, you were victims back then more than anything. I sought Mr. Lenny's help with the smuggling case, nothing more. The way I look at it, it's a collaboration between us as people, not the organizations we represent. Besides, by working together, we can expose the truth as quickly as possible. You can hardly say that's at odds with the justice my organization strives for. Not at all. I was planning to invite you from the very beginning, Miss Lynette. It's just that my assistant here raised some objections.
Lenny, I'm not the same person I was back then. That little girl who did nothing but cower in the corner in fear, she doesn't need saving anymore.
I'm sorry, Lynette. You're right. I let my concerns get the better of me.
Oh, and the next time you want to distract me, you should try a different approach.
Who's this? You pick up a stray while I was gone?
It's a bit complicated. I'll explain later. Anyway, her name's Bonnie.
Well, if there are no objections, then I suppose the only thing left to say is, Lynette, Traveler, welcome to the team.
It appears the Lefebvre family was very particular in their use of insignias and emblems. The family would use different emblems to mark differences in status, blood relation, and the like. In fact, the insignia that was discovered on the pendant was used to represent an illegitimate child.
It's highly likely. That very status might have been what allowed him to emerge from the fall of his family relatively unscathed. It would also explain why he was able to assume a new identity as a researcher with relative ease.
We discovered something interesting, though. After talking to some of his co-workers, it appears he pretty much works at the Institute in name only. He's practically been cast out.
Apparently, Pierre was once addicted to synth. He tried to use the resources at the Institute to create a substance with a similar effect. He claimed it was just for research purposes, but the Institute revoked his access to the relevant materials regardless. He was placed on disciplinary leave, pending a thorough investigation of his actions. But it seems the Institute ran into some trouble along the way. Could have been a lack of personnel or a timing issue. In any case, they had to table their formal investigation into Pierre. And as for his family background, it appears none of his co-workers at the Institute were aware of that information. All they could tell us was that he was quite the recluse. Other than the pendant, we didn't find anything else of note at his residence in Poisson. Based on the samples of imitation synth we've been able to analyze, it appears the substance leaves behind strong traces wherever it's produced or stored. Those traces might not be obvious to the casual observer, but they're not something our guard poodles would miss. Pierre's home, though, came up completely clean. We didn't find any records indicating possible involvement in overseas transactions either. So, the Marechaussee Phantom didn't view him as a major suspect at first.
Maybe he had a separate, dedicated area where he made the imitation synth.
Well, his neighbors did say he was often gone for long stretches of time. You would think with him out and about so much, people would have spotted him around Poisson, but residents said they barely ever saw him in town. If his reclusive nature was just a matter of keeping a low profile, I guess it would make sense for him to have a secret base to carry out his business.
After he disappeared, the guards conducted a thorough search of Poisson, but they didn't come across any suspicious locations.
Poisson. You know Hotel de Boer, where I first found Bonnie? To get there from Poisson, you have to cross a stretch of ocean. It's not somewhere a cat could just wander off on its own.
A cat? You mean...
Bonnie is Pierre's cat.
Oh, that's right! When the Marechaussee Phantom first tracked him down, I remember there being something about a cat in their report. So this is her?
From what we've learned about Pierre's habits, he doesn't seem like the type to venture out without a purpose. So what you're saying, Lynette, is that Bonnie couldn't have gone missing in Poisson. If that's true, then...
Exactly. Bonnie might even know where it is.
Wait, you think the cat can lead us there? But she's not trained like one of our guard poodles. How is she supposed to understand what we want her to do?
Meow. Meow meow. Meow? Near the coast, the beach, and beneath the cliffs. The place we're looking for is most likely north of the Court of Fontaine.
Well, I've certainly never taken a witness statement like this before.
Well, if it works out, maybe it's something worth getting used to.
Cats and humans are actually pretty alike. When it comes to communication, most of what we want to convey can be accomplished through body language alone. But humans tend to rely too much on speech to ever take advantage of that fact. Of course, body language has its limitations. You're not going to be able to get across anything too complicated.
The important thing is that we now have a lead. Let's try and find a place that matches the clues Bonnie gave us.
Seems like Bonnie is trying to take us somewhere. Gardamex ahead!
Look out!
No touching! I can fix this!
Wow, Lynette, you found this place so easily. If I thought there was any chance you'd say yes, I'd recruit you into the Special Patrol here and now, no questions asked.
Sounds familiar. I pretty much receive letters daily from people trying to poach her from me.
Let's just focus on our search. There's a lot to investigate.
Aha! Just as we thought. This is where the imitation synth was being made. Looks like he's got more than just imitation synths stashed around here. In addition to the raw materials needed to synthesize the substance itself, there's a large quantity of cleaning agents and a few drugs I haven't been able to identify. These cleaning agents are likely used to dispel traces of the substance, like its smell. The Special Patrol did some digging into imitation synth. Our records indicate that it's very difficult for ordinary people to detect traces left behind by the stuff. I'm sure that was the case for Pierre as well. It must have taken a considerable amount of time and skill to ensure all those traces get washed away. But what are these other drugs for?
The material these bags are made of, it's quite rare. It's the very same, actually. Romaritime flower fiber. But there's something special about the composition of these bags. I took a closer look, and it appears they're not only waterproof, but also corrosion and leak resistant. Even the strings look specially designed to keep the bags closed nice and tight. I came across some bags made of the same material just now, but they were much smaller and thinner. From the look of them, they seemed far less durable as well. Very similar, actually. Normally, it would be easy for a guard poodle to sniff out the imitation synth, but if it was sealed away in a bag like that, it might be possible to elude detection for some time. But what could these big bags be for then? If the goal is to keep the imitation synth hidden and sealed away, these bags seem a bit too conspicuous.
When the Marechaussee Phantom searched Pierre's house, there was no sign of these barrels, right? You're right. That doesn't seem like his way of doing things. How did he get them here, then? Only the lower halves of the barrels appear to have been submerged in water.
Based on the various ingredients we've found, this appears to be where Pierre was cooking up his imitation synth. It looks like he used a special cleaning agent to get rid of any residual traces of the substance on his person before he left. That's how he was able to get past the guard poodles.
So then he transferred the imitation synth into small sealed bags and took it somewhere else for the drop-off.
No. I don't believe our suspect is the kind of person who'd go around carrying incriminating evidence with him. That would potentially create too many eyewitnesses. The cleaning agent and the sealed bags might get past the guard poodles, but if a member of the public or even a guard on patrol happened to see him during the drop-off, a quick search would reveal everything. That's still a very risky operation.
The barrels we found were wet around the base, but the top half was dry. As if they'd been standing upright in the water. If you put a barrel in the water, it will normally float on its side. Unless it's heavily loaded, in which case it'll sink.
Yes. With flotation rings around the body of the barrels, they'd stay upright in the water. And then he could afford to load them more fully.
You think he used floating barrels? I suppose if he acted at night, when there are very few other boats around and visibility is low, it's a valid theory. We can't rule it out.
But then, wouldn't the barrels be carried off by the waves or the currents? How would the person doing the pickup know where to look?
Traveler, can you come take a dip in the sea with me? I have a feeling that somewhere down there, we might find some rope. If a rope can be used to keep a pet from running away, then why not a barrel? Got it. Time to go up and report. As expected, we found a few pieces of rope and some anchoring stones underwater. If you attach them to a floating barrel, it would look like this. With this anchoring system, it would be possible to use floating barrels for the drop-off. You would just need to drop them in the water at the agreed-upon location. We also came across the wreckage of a small boat. It must have been left out on the water and capsized due to the force of the wind and waves. Its small size, however, would have made it perfect for staying undetected.
Let's talk this through. Based on the evidence we've collected, it seems like Pierre would row a small boat out to the agreed-upon transfer point, drop off the barrels, leave, and then row back and retrieve them after the transfer was complete.
It could be that he was trying to avoid meeting up with his associate face-to-face. As one of the sole survivors of the Lefebvre family, maybe he was just used to that sort of elusive lifestyle.
It seems like Pierre deliberately chose the floating barrel method so that the goods could be dropped off and picked up at separate times. That way, the two parties wouldn't have to meet each other.
Well, if that's the case, they must not have a very close working relationship.
Let's not jump to any conclusions just yet. Assumptions can be detrimental to solving a case. It's possible they were just trying to keep a low profile. Two boats sailing to the same location at once could be too conspicuous. The most important thing is that we can now confirm Pierre wasn't acting alone. The floating barrel drop-off system is proof enough of that. Let's say for now that he was only in charge of producing the imitation synth. That would mean there has to be at least one other person involved in the operation, likely in charge of transporting the goods across the border.
Since we've determined that the goods were transported by boat, maybe we can track down some travel logs or something.
We can certainly check the various ports for that information. It's possible, however, that Pierre's associate also used a small boat for the transport, and docked along the shore rather than at a large port. If that's the case, it's unlikely there would be any record left behind. Absolutely. Before Pierre disappeared, we made sure to investigate all sorts of outward-bound vessels. We also had port authorities keep a lookout for anything suspicious. Unfortunately, we were never able to find out how they managed to get the imitation synth across the border. You're right. Whatever vessel was used for the pickup, the person responsible for smuggling the substance out of Fontaine would have had to use a larger vessel for the actual transport. That's the only way they would be able to smuggle on a large enough scale to make a profit. They must have found a way to disguise the imitation synth to clear port inspections. Exactly. We can't let any opportunities slip through the cracks. Although, given the amount of ports that could be involved, we should probably split up.
I'll run home and ask some of my brothers and sisters to try and dig up some information.
I should also head back and update my platoon on our progress. I'll grab some reinforcements while I'm at it. Lynette, Traveler, why don't you head to Lumiduce Harbor and see what you can find out?
All right. Come on, Bonnie. You too.
Oh, Lynette, Traveler. And Bonnie, too. What brings you all here?
Did something happen?
Oh. I see. Thank you for everything you're doing for the people of Fontaine. I'm in charge of guarding the port. You mentioned you were after some travel logs, right? I can go fetch those for you.
Looks like I've got another hard day of work ahead of me. No, not usually. It's this incident that happened recently. Before that, everything was normal. All we had to do was confiscate anything suspicious and we could call it a day. Pretty simple stuff. But things are much more complicated now. We somehow let suspicious cargo pass through the port undetected. Not even our guard poodles were able to sniff it out. Even worse, we still don't know how the perpetrator was able to conceal the goods so well.
By suspicious cargo, do you mean imitation synth?
Yep. However, prohibited substances are just one example. We confiscate all sorts of contraband during the course of our inspections. Or at least, we're supposed to.
So what happens to the goods you confiscate?
Oh, we keep them in a storage locker. If they turn out to be something particularly dubious, we'll turn them over to the Misión Legendaria. If the goods are only slightly suspicious but could otherwise be harmless, like raw materials that could potentially be used to create contraband, we return them to the ship they were confiscated from, instead of letting them pass through the port.
Sorry for the wait. These are the travel logs for all the recent activity at the port.
Oh, you brought Gerard with you.
Actually, he followed me here himself. It's like he smells something on me. Huh. I wonder why Gerard is reacting to you two so strongly.
Huh? We were so careful not to touch it, but we still ended up with traces on us. If it leaves a residue so easily, I just don't understand how the culprit was able to disguise the goods at all.
Why don't you have a look at the travel logs first? All ships coming in and out of the port are recorded here, except for the ones the port authorities ride to and from work.
The Humane Society. Their name is all over the exit logs. The purpose for leaving is always listed as overseas adoption.
Ah, the director of the organization explained that, actually. He said a lot of the cat and dog breeds unique to Fontaine are also very popular overseas. So, his organization offers an overseas adoption program.
Bernard, the director of the Humane Society, was the man who came looking for Bonnie earlier. Have you figured it out too, Traveler? The way the criminal disguised the goods? When Bernard asked to take a closer look at Bonnie, he was actually checking whether there was any imitation synth in her stomach.
Wait, what?
The sealed bags we found at the secret base. They were specially made to be corrosion resistant. There were gaps around the lids of the barrels, and airbags were used to keep them upright in the water. Those drug shovers found at the secret base, she most likely didn't recognize them because they're not used on human beings. It's an anesthetic used on pets. The perpetrator must have given it to the animals. Pierre must have made the animals swallow the sealed bags full of imitation synth at his secret base. Then, he stuffed them into floating barrels and left the rest to Bernard.
The sealed bags combined with an animal's body odor would certainly be enough to mask the scent of imitation synth.
During our inspections, we would have never thought to inspect the bellies of those animals for anything suspicious. Even if we tried to feel around for something, I'm sure it would be difficult to detect.
Exactly. I bet Bernard even transported animals with synth in their stomach alongside ones without. That way, it would be even harder to say with certainty that something was amiss. She's probably in the clear. Otherwise, Bernard would have never left without her. I'm guessing he didn't know whether Pierre had already hidden the next batch of imitation synth before he fled. Just imagine. He sees the notice we put in the Steambird, and it turns out that one of the very cats he gave to Pierre for the smuggling operation is out in the open, roaming the streets of Fontaine. If Pierre had already hidden the next batch of imitation synth, then Bonnie would practically be living proof of their crimes. He would have had no choice but to go after her.
So, That's why he came to find you and insisted on taking a closer look at the cat.
Wait a second, I'm a little lost here. I get the part about hiding the substance in the pets, but those... what did you call them again? Floating barrels? Why even put the animals in there in the first place? If you've got something as convenient as a floating barrel, why not just stuff it with the imitation synth directly? Why not wait to hide the stuff until after the exchange has been made?
In order to make sure the animals could swallow the sealed bags, they made them extremely thin. Had they not done that, the animals would have likely bitten or chewed through them. That step would have required a lot of energy, as well as a certain amount of technical expertise, so it was better left to the more experienced Pierre. We've already proven how easy it is to pick up trace amounts of imitation synth, so I'm sure Bernard was taking all the precautions he could to avoid the same fate.
Okay. Then, let's head to the Humane Society right away and bring that guy to justice. I'll bring a Gardamek to speed up the process.